Hello, everyone. Welcome to William and the Magic Box. Today on our show, we are going to have Melissa. Melissa is a teacher from New Jersey in the USA. So let's see what Melissa has to say. Enjoy the interview. Hello, Melissa.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you.
So tell me how 2023 has been treating you so far.
Well, it's still early days, but so far, very, very good. Had a wonderful holiday, Christmas, and then in the days afterwards, my birthday, which was right before Christmas. So December was great. And so far, January's been nothing but good to me just yet.
Amazing. Do you do some new resolutions, or you kind of person that you don't think too much? Just you just live by day.
You know what? Years ago, I would do resolutions. Certainly when I taught, I'm retired now, but when I taught, we always would have a lesson about resolutions and making plans for the new year. But in the last few years, I've really decided not to make resolutions. I like to reflect on what's happened the last year, the good and the bad, the positive and the negative. And then I look ahead and just say, I have to be happy with what I have at this moment, what's happening to me at this moment. I do make plans, but I know plans can be changed in a heartbeat. So I just try to look at the new year as a year of opportunities and to be happy with whatever it is comes my way.
Amazing. And how did you spend your New Year's Eve?
Very, very quietly. I was in bed by 10 o'clock, most likely. I haven't rung in the new year in quite a while. My husband did stay up. I think he was in bed at 12:05. So he wasn't partying either. Just quiet. At this age and at this stage in my life, I don't really need to go out and party or have a big night. I like it quiet.
It's so interesting how we change. Like every year, we change our way of celebrating the new year. Of the thoughts as well. Like the vision that you have during this time of the year. We change a lot. I think every year we see in a different way.
Yes. When I was younger, I loved to get dressed up and go somewhere and, stay up until midnight and, pop the champagne and, kiss under the mistletoe. But that was for a younger girl, and moved past that. And now I'm happy where I am.
Did you ever have any superstition like during this time of the year? For example, I have one at midnight. A few years ago, I was watching a TV, or I saw somebody talking that saying that they need to be outdoors at midnight for some reason. And since that day, like a few years ago, I need to be outdoors. For the last few years, I've been spent with friends, like some houses or some parties, but 5 minutes before midnight, I just run away outside for 2-3 minutes just to have these moments, and I come back again, whatever I am. So that's the only superstition that I have through those few years.
I've never heard of that before. I don't think I have any superstitions regarding New Year's. Some traditions, again, these were when I was younger and when I would be up at midnight. One was always you had to kiss somebody. Usually for most of my life, it was my parents, but you had to kiss somebody at New Year's. My daughter, who's grown now, but when she was a child, she did not like that part of the tradition. And when I was very young, and I think this came from wanting to scare away the old year and bring in the new year. But where I grew up, which was an urban setting, instead of doing horns and party, those noisemakers, we would go outside and bang pots and pans. And the whole neighborhood, probably the whole city, would do it. And it would be loud and raucous, and that was a must. Now, that's something that we kids love to do because we were making noise. So traditions, but not superstitions.
Amazing. So, Melissa, tell me, where are you from?
I'm from Chester, New Jersey. I was born and bred in New Jersey. I grew up in Jersey City, which, as I just mentioned, is a very urban area. Not quite a city like Manhattan, but certainly a city where the homes are close together and there are apartment buildings and lots of stores and lots of activity. I moved to Chester in, oh gosh, was it 1992? And the reason I came out here, and when I say out here, it's about an hour from where I grew up, and it's very different. It's a much more country setting. I live almost in the woods. I have neighbors, but it's a very wooded area, lots of farms. I moved out here because I got a job teaching here. And once I began teaching, A, I didn't want to commute any longer, and B, I knew that once I had a child or a family of my own, that I would want them to be with me in the school system. And that's what ended up happening.
Oh, wow. I was about to ask you, you said you're retired right now, but you are a teacher. You are a teacher.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about your career.
Well, I was teaching when I retired in July of 2021. I had been teaching for 35 years. Oh. And I taught the very youngest students. I taught nursery school, first grade, second grade, and kindergarten. And so I always worked with the young. I spent a few years in a private school. And then once I got the job here in Chester, I started working in the public school here. And for most of the career, this is all pre-COVID, I loved it. I wouldn't even say teaching is a career. It's even more a calling. For most of my life, I identified, the first thing I would say when I meet someone and they ask about myself was, I'm a teacher. It just was who I am. And in some ways it still is, but now I'm learning to see myself in other ways. But I did love teaching. I loved connecting with the youngest kids, and I loved all the things that kids brought to the classroom, the openness, the willingness, the love. They love their teacher when they're that age, and that feels good. That really does. And I love seeing the changes in them, you know, especially when I taught kindergarten. They would come and they were babies, and by the time they left me, they were really students. So that was very fulfilling.
Oh, I can see your students watch this interview right now, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, I remember her very well."
And some of them will say it, yeah.
Amazing. Melissa, are you ready to go on a beautiful journey through your memories in life and to share your point of views?
I sure am.
Amazing. Welcome to William and the Magic Box. My best friend. Okay, full of random questions. I'm just going to play a song now just for us to relax a little bit before the first question. Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, so before we start the game, during the journey, if comes up a question that you don't want to talk about for some reason, you don't want to answer, I always can change, okay?
Very good.
Let's do it. First question for you is, what is the best advice have you ever received?
The best advice that I've ever received is don't worry so much about what other people think. It's not one that I've always been able to follow. I've tried, certainly as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at it. But I think I spent a lot of my youth and growing up years concerned about everyone else, not wanting to be embarrassed, not wanting to be thought of as different. You know, I was different. And it took a long time for me to really take that advice to heart. Don't worry what other people think, because you're not going to be able to change it. If they don't accept you for who you are and what you are, then they're really not worth giving the time of day to. So that's probably the best advice I've ever been given.
Two questions based on your answer. The first one is, when you mentioned that you're different, what do you mean by that? And the second question is, when was the moment that you realized that, okay, I don't care what people think of me. That's my true self, and that's the way I'm going to be.
I was different for a couple of reasons. One, I was just a very quirky kid. I didn't always share the same interests as my peers. I was younger, both chronologically than most of the kids in my grade, and I was definitely younger emotionally. So I was always, they were here and I was here. And I just liked things that they considered babyish or silly. And I wasn't the kind of person who could hide what I liked. I had to live it. So there was a lot of teasing that went on as far as that goes. I was also different because my parents had a rocky marriage. They stayed married throughout my childhood, so I wasn't a child of divorce, but there was a lot of turmoil in my home growing up, and I didn't want anybody to know about that. So I didn't have friends over. I didn't have play dates at my house or too many sleepovers, because I spent a lot of my time trying to escape that. And I always felt like I was different from everyone else, because even though I'm sure this wasn't the case, in my child's mind, I thought everybody else had a happy, peaceful home life, and I didn't. Of course, that wasn't the case, but as a child, that was the way I was thinking. And what was your second part of the question?
When was the moment that you realized, okay, I don't care anymore what people think of me? Did something happen, or you just through your like growing up, you kind of learned this lesson?
I think it was a gradual acceptance of it. Yeah. As you get older, certainly once I had a daughter and I looked at life from a mother's perspective as opposed to just my own, and what I wanted for her, that made a huge difference in my outlook. And just age. There really is something that comes with age besides wrinkles. It is wisdom, and it's learning what you want in life and what you don't want in life, what helps you and contributes to your life, and what takes away from the quality of your life. So amazing. That's pretty much how it came about.
Very good. Next question, let's do it. Okay, Melissa from New Jersey. Next question for you is, what have you learned during the coronavirus lockdown? Those 2 years when the world went upside down. For you, what's the biggest lesson that you took out of this challenge journey?
Probably to appreciate my time with others. I am a pretty social person. I like to spend time with friends and with family. I like to sit over a cup of coffee or a meal and catch up with someone. I missed that tremendously during the shutdown. I like to be out and about in New York City, seeing shows and visiting museums. All of that was of course, shut down and taken away. So I missed that. And once the world started opening up again, I cherished those times even more because of the time that I hadn't had that. It was a tough time because, well, it's a tough time for everyone naturally, but trying to teach through a pandemic is not something I would ever recommend to anyone. I was glad when, actually it's what really was the reason I retired. I was glad when I no longer had to do that, because it just wasn't like teaching any longer.
I see. So during the corona crisis, that's the way when you decide to retire, or you're already expecting or planning yourself for the retirement?
That I wasn't really planning on retiring. I was close to that point, and I certainly was of age and had the amount of years that you needed to be able to retire, but I wasn't really planning on it just yet. But the year that we went back to school. So there was that period of time from March to the end of the year when everything was closed and everything was virtual. That was bad, but it wasn't terrible. Going back when it was still distancing and masks, and I would have half the class in school and half the class at home. That was not anything that I'd ever experienced as a teacher. It wasn't really teaching. And during that year, that was when I thought I really need to look into retirement. I probably would have taught for another year or two after that had COVID not happened. But that was the straw.
And when you look back from now, today, when you look back, you think was the right moment in your career?
Absolutely, it was. Yep, I have no regrets. People ask me all the time because I was such an involved teacher. I lived, breathed, and ate teaching. So people who know me ask me all the time, don't you miss it? And I can honestly say, not really. There are things about it I miss, sure, but I don't. And that surprised me inordinately, because I thought I was going to be the teacher who was wheeled in at 90 years old, still teaching. And when my friends, all of whom retired a little bit before me, would say, oh, you'll get to that point, you'll just know. And I would look at them and say, nope, that's not going to happen to me. But it happened to me. It was the right time.
I see. I think when you do something with passion, with love, I think we feel when it's time to kind of maybe not stop, but maybe change your lifestyle, or maybe focus something else, or end a career. Do you know what I mean? I think we just feel it. Of course, sometimes as well, like with COVID, it's kind of maybe could be a wake up call or something like this. Okay, let's reflect about this moment in my life, and that's maybe what happened to you. Kind of reflect, and you felt it as well. Was the moment?
It really was.
Absolutely. Next question, Melissa. Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, before the next question, talking about teaching, for you, during this, those years of teaching that you loved the most, you really liked it. But what was the most challenging part through your career that you can discuss about it?
The most challenging part was the ever increasing reliance upon testing and assessment. That happened in the last 10, 15 years. In the golden age of teaching, as far as my career goes, in the 90s and then the early 2000s, it was much more of a hands-on experiential approach to teaching. These kids are really young. They're 5, 6, and 7 years old. They learn best through play, through experimentation, through games. And back at that time, we teachers had the freedom to teach in that way. We had a curriculum naturally, but we weren't tied into workbooks or being on the same page as the person in the classroom next to you. There was a lot of teacher freedom and teacher choice, and it made for an experience for the whole child. As the years went on, things started to narrow down. The curriculum became much more about subjects and not the experience. And then they started testing the Jesus out of kids, little kids who don't really, a test doesn't really measure what a child that young can do. And that has only increased. And that was extraordinarily frustrating to those of us who taught really young kids, because we knew developmentally this wasn't the best way. And yet we were required to do it that way. And that was a challenge.
Interesting. Next question for you is, what is the happiest day in your life so far, and why you consider that?
Oh, that's an easy one. It was the day my daughter was born. Yes, October 14th, 1993. She's 29 now. And it was I think most any parent will say this, but it was the most life-changing event. And being a mother is probably one of those times that has changed me forever. But that was a pretty darn amazing day.
Wow. Saying that, what's the biggest similarity between you and her, and what's the biggest difference?
All right. Well, similarity is she definitely has my ambition or ability to organize, ability to get things done. She's not a procrastinator. She's a planner. She likes to know what's happening, and she likes to have some form of control over that. The biggest difference is that she is far less driven by her emotions than I am. I am all emotions. Her father is all practical, and she's, for personality and temperament, she's much more like him. And for that, I'm really happy, because it wasn't easy to, it's not easy to be emotional and sensitive. That was another reason we talked before about how I felt different as a child. I was always emotional and felt things very deeply. While of course she has emotions, she's much more able to control them. She's much more steady, and I'm happy about that.
Wow. And did she ever attend your class? Did you ever teach her for your career or not? She was in a different
No,
school.
I never did, but she did attend the same school that I did. And that was probably one of the greatest joys of teaching while she was in school, because she would come with me and she would go home with me, and we would have the same vacations and the same snow days. I knew all of her friends because they were probably in my class and she was in the class next door. I knew all the families. Yes, you could go over this person's house. No, I don't think you'll go there. They'll come here. Those kind of things. So I loved that. And she liked that up until about third grade. And then, of course, it wasn't as cool to have mom as a teacher, like kind of, giving you the once over. But when as long as it lasted, it was really good.
Amazing. Next question, let's do it. Okay, Melissa, next question for you is, how would you describe a perfect friendship?
One based on some mutual things in common. I think when I look at my list of friends in my head, we all have something in common. It's not the same thing that I have in common with everyone. Definitely humor. I don't think I'm friends with anybody who doesn't have a good sense of humor. Some of them appreciate my sense of humor. Some of them have a humor all their own that makes me laugh continually. And that includes my husband. And so I think those two, and of course, an understanding and a mutual respect for each other. And one more thing, it's important that that person, that friend, gets me, understands me. Doesn't have to share all of the same likes, but they have to understand what makes me tick and be okay with that. And then, of course, I would reciprocate.
Do you have most of your best friends, they are teachers as well or not?
No, most of my good friends are not teachers. While I was teaching, I was close with those people.
Yep.
I do have a few that are teachers that I taught with that do remain my very close friends. But by and large, no. And I don't think that's a choice I made. Just think that's who I came across and who I connected with.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day as well, it's a workplace somehow. You connect with them over there. And sometimes outside work, you don't have the same connection. And it's not wrong with that. It's just a natural thing.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Ready for another one?
I am.
Let's do it. Okay, Okay, Melissa, next question for you is, good question. If you could sit down with your 13-year-old self, what would you say?
13. Oh my goodness. It gets better. It gets a lot better. Those are, I think being 13 is tough for almost anyone.
Yeah.
Adolescence is a time of a lot of upheaval. But for me particularly, given the fact that, my home life was not ideal, and I had all these, just the beginning of hormones and changes in, the way I was starting to look at life and how I was behaving. And I didn't really have my parents to go to. They certainly gave me everything I needed as far as a home and food and school and clothing, but emotionally, they were too involved in what was happening between them. So that was a time I felt very alone and very confused. And so if I were looking at myself, first of all, I would give myself a hug, because I was probably at 13, I was crying for one reason or another. And then I would say, it gets better, and you'll actually learn from this.
Saying that your parents, they supported you when you said, okay, I would like to be a teacher, or they were against it for some reason?
Oh, no, they definitely did. I think that my parents would have been happy with most any career I chose. They weren't strict in that way. And certainly in my family, education was always important. And they knew I loved school when I was a student. And I don't think they were surprised that I became a teacher. Even though we don't always get the respect or the salary that we deserve, it's still a really good profession for the most part. And I think they were proud that I was a teacher, because they knew how happy it made me. And most parents are happy when their kids are happy.
And I think as well, parenting, when they, as you said, I think they feel proud when they go, okay, my child is a teacher. They want to be a teacher. It's something proud of you about, isn't it? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Next question. Melissa, before the next question, tell me if you can share, if you remember the first day that you worked as a teacher, your first class, if you can remember, and also the last one as well. Tell me the emotions between both of them.
All right. The very first time I had my own true class as a teacher was January of 1986. I was teaching kindergarten in a private school in Jersey City, where I grew up, so a very urban setting. I had gone in before school started, I had gone in over the Christmas break to see my classroom. I was so excited about setting up my classroom. And that's something that never changed. I love to decorate it and pick out the toys and the books that would be displayed. So I went over that Christmas break and saw a room that was in shambles. I mean, there were broken toys in a toy box and torn bulletin board paper. And I couldn't wait to get my hands in and start changing. And I do remember so clearly that I asked my parents and my boyfriend, who then became my husband, the only thing I wanted for Christmas was toys for my new classroom.
Oh my God, that's sweet.
So I went in very, very enthusiastic. I'm sure I was afraid, but maybe not afraid, maybe nervous. Mm-hmm. But I think I was mostly just really amped up for it. I really was. It was everything I wanted at the time. Of course, it changed, and then my wants changed, but I just really wanted to be up there in front of them and just start my career.
Oh, and the last class that you had for your career?
I'll always remember them because it was the year that was so different from any other year. That was the year that was COVID. That was second grade. I felt the overall feeling I felt that year, and this didn't have anything to do with the students, was frustration. I was frustrated because I had to teach the children on the computer at the same time as I had to teach the children in the classroom.
Wow.
I was frustrated because we couldn't touch each other. We couldn't play games together. I couldn't even read to them the way I always had. I had to have my back to them because I had to be looking at the computer and facing the microphone and having something to explain. So I was always frustrated. Things always were changing. As the face of COVID changed, we had different protocols that we had to follow. But the students themselves, they were troopers. They rallied. They didn't mind wearing masks. Doesn't mean the mask always stayed on their face. I mean, a lot of times it was drooping down, but they didn't mind that. They didn't resist all of the changes that I was resisting. They just accepted it. You know, part of it is that they didn't really know any better. They didn't know what the second grade experience could be. I did, but they were pretty good. They were pretty good about following the rules. And one of the things that I did like about COVID teaching was that because we couldn't assemble with other classes, normally all second graders would have had their recess together on the playground. That year we had to be separated and the teacher had to be there with them. I got to see children without any toys, because we couldn't have them, without any equipment, play imaginatively. It blew my mind. You could give them a stick and all of a sudden there would be an entire game built around it. It reminded me the kids really are kids. I don't care how many devices or internet experiences they've had, they're still kids. So I did like seeing that part of them. And because it was my last class, it'll always have a special place in my heart.
Oh, and I'm sure there on their heart as well, knowing that. Okay, next question for you is, what's the biggest prize you ever won?
Know that I won too many prizes. I was the beneficiary of a prize, though, that my mother won once when I was in high school. My mother was always very lucky. She did a lot of radio contests. Wow. And sometimes the prizes would be little, like a ticket to a show. But this year it was a raffle type of a, probably for a Catholic church entity, contest rather. And she won a cruise for 2 to the Bahamas. Oh, now, wow. we did not take vacations as a family. We were, not that in sync. And so when she won the cruise, we just couldn't believe it. So she took myself, I got the other free ticket, and then she paid, I think it was like a half price fare for my brothers to come too. So we all went, and that was probably my first big trip anywhere, and I loved it. And because she won it, it just made it all the sweeter. Oh, very sweet. Right, I have 3 questions left for you. All righty. Before the next question, I'd like to share something with you. As a child, I remember I'm never gonna forget my first day at school. I was fascinated about going to school. I had 2 older cousins, and they started going to school 2 years, like when I understood about school, like 2 years before me. And I was crying when they were going to school because I want to go as well. Yeah. And I have a picture. So 1 year before I started going to school, my grandmother, she asked the teacher if I could attend the first day of my cousin, just her first day, just to make me happy because I was crying. I want to go there. And I have a picture of me sitting there, like looking, I was fascinated about it. And also my first day at school, I'll never forget, because it was like a dream come true. And I remember my first teacher as well, as you say in the beginning, that,
about how much it means for the students, like, the teacher, how special they are. And I remember her name, Ladislan was her name. And I remember for me, she was like an idol, remember seeing this teacher like every morning, like, teach me. For me, I could see her as literally someone that I trust 100%. Whatever she would tell me, I'll do it because I trust her. And I remember that. So I'll never forget my first day. I just remember holding hands with my colleagues around, like going to... It was literally a day come true. And I remember halfway, actually, when I started school, she was pregnant already. So halfway of the year, she need to leave before. And my mom was worried that I would lose interest of school because of that, because I was so connected with her. But guess what? The teacher who covered her, I got very connected as well. Her name was Marcia, and I remember her as well. I just loved her as well. So I think everything was connected with the education, learning as well. And suddenly I'm someone who I liked so much, and come another one as well who I connected with very well. So yeah, my first year, it will always be remembered for sure.
Sounds like you were a very open child, very much looking forward to school, but also accepting of who this teacher is, because you had two teachers and you had equally good experiences with them. You probably were one of their favorites, because you probably just went in with a beaming smile, and anything they said you wanted to do, anything they taught you wanted to learn. Those are the kind of kids that we teach. We teachers love all of the students, but sometimes when the teacher's having a tough time for whatever reason it may be, they look out among their students and they pick that one kid who they know is with them. One of my friends once said to me, it's like drinking the Kool-Aid. That kid is with you. I bet you were that kid for those teachers.
Oh, but I'll tell you something now. Actually, after that, I lost, I lost contact with, I grew up, I went to different school, and, things changed. And I'm sure she went to another school as well. I don't remember. But when I was 18 years old, I was living in the capital of my state, in a different city. And guess what? I was working in McDonald's, was on my first job. And actually, she literally came to the counter that I was working. And I was expecting, when she came to me, I look at her, and she looked at me, I look at her, and she didn't recognize me, but I did. And I was like, oh my God, I know her. And I was like putting through the order, and I look at her and I said, is your name Ladislan? She was like, how do you know that? I said, you were my first teacher. She was like, oh my God. And then she was like, oh my God, how do you remember me? I said, because it was a special day. And I started talking to her. And guess what? She remembered me. She said, yes, I remember you now. And I told her about the story that she was pregnant. And guess what? She had her daughter. She said, look, this is the reason why I left.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, and it was, can you imagine, like in such a big city, out of nowhere, I had this other moment with her. And she was, after my excitement, talk about, my childhood and everything, she said, of course, I remember you now. Now you're saying, and I remember you as well. I said, wow. Yeah.
That is so, it's not surprising to me, because we teachers do, even sometimes if we can't remember the face as they get older. We once the connection has been reconnected, it all starts flooding back for us. I remember once, I do have a really good memory for my students. A number of years ago, I was at an event and someone was talking to me and mentioned my name. They said, oh, Mrs. Tonnessen. And so there was this woman behind me, and she came up to me very tentatively and said, are you Mrs. Tonnessen, the teacher? I looked at her, and it was really like a flood. I said, oh, hi, you're XYZ, your mother's name was this, you lived here, your best friend was this. And this was very early in my career that I had this girl as a student. She started to cry. She said, how did you remember me? I said, I just do. You were an important part of my life, as most of my students were. And she had with her her baby at the time. She was a baby when I taught her. Now she has her own. But she was shocked and floored that I remembered that. But most teachers get that invested. I mean, the good teachers anyway.
Absolutely. Right. Next question for you is, which question would you like to be asked?
What question would I like to be asked? What some of the questions that you've asked, like your other
No,
interviews?
if you're in an interview, like, which question would you like to be asked? You're like, okay, I wish, for example, before we start the game, you're like, okay, I wish William asked me this question. Could be anything. What would be?
Well, I'm going to go with one of the questions that I've seen you ask some of your other interviewers. What is your favorite kitchen smell? And the reason why is because my answer is none. I have, and anybody who's watching this and knows me is tired of hearing it, but I have a really sensitive sense of smell. And it's not just that I can smell things and identify them when people can't, but any smell, even really good smells, after a minute or two, really start to overpower me. And so I can't even think of anything else except that smell permeating me. And so even though I love the smell of baking and the smell of cookies and things like that, in my kitchen, I don't want any smells. The only one I'm going to tolerate is bleach, because I know that means I have a clean kitchen. So you probably didn't have that answer too often among all your interviews, but that's mine.
I love it. It's a unique answer. I love that.
I'm a unique person.
2 questions left for you. Let's do it. But before the last question, let's pretend now that I'm going to put all your students together in a room. And I'm going to ask them, what do you remember the most about your teacher, about Melissa? They call you not Melissa, Mrs.?
They call me Mrs. Tonnessen.
Okay, Mrs. Tonnessen. So if you, all of them, what do you think the majority, all of them, they're going to go like, okay, I remember her because of that. What do you think your students would say?
I think they'd say she was a lot of fun. I did try to, I ran a tight ship in that, you know, I didn't put up with a lot of foolishness, and I really made sure their behavior stayed appropriate. And, you know, that it was a good experience for everyone. If you have one child who's misbehaving, that really takes away from other people's learning. But I also made things really fun for them. Sometimes it would be just a funny voice. You know, let's say we were doing a very boring assignment. I might ask questions in a funny voice, and then they'd have to respond in a funny voice. Things like that. We did a lot of singing in my classroom. I think most kids would remember me as, not that I was a singer, but we played a lot of music all of the time. I have some students who tell me even now, their parents I may be friends with on Facebook or see in town, who say, oh, my child remembers that 50 Nifty State song. They can still sing it. So I think they might say that too, that I was fun and that I really liked music.
Oh, good. Next question is, if you could be a character in a movie, who that would be and why?
Oh, that is a good question. Oh, in a movie?
Yeah. Or in a series, what comes to your mind?
When I was little, I always became the character in a movie or a TV show. I mean, I lived my life like that. When I was very young, I would watch the TV series called Little House on the Prairie, which was about Laura Ingalls. And in my mind, I was Laura Ingalls. I walked around with braids in my hair and a bonnet. And even when I was in 7th grade and everybody else was wearing mini skirts and platforms, in my school picture, I have a long dress and braids on. When I say I was different as a kid, I wasn't kidding. So that's definitely one. I think I'd like to be Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
Oh,
my favorite movie of all time. I like the fact that she had all those adventures and she met those really good friends along the way. I also would like to wear the ruby slippers. And also when I was very young, I watched Shirley Temple movies. Shirley Temple was a child star in the 1930s, and her movies would be shown on TV every Saturday. And I would want every week, whatever part she was playing in the movie, that's the part I played out that week. I'm still a huge Shirley Temple fan. I have a big collection of Shirley Temple items. I know Shirley Temple's children. She's still a big, big part of me. So I think Laura from Little House, Dorothy, and Shirley. Those would be, I choose any of them. Any of those I'd like to be.
Amazing. Ready for the last question?
Sure am.
Let's do it. Last one. But before the last question, I'm going to ask two questions in one. Right. Who was your favorite teacher? Okay. And also the second part is, being a teacher, of course, we're teaching students, people that are learning a life, life lessons, not just like theory, but life as well. You're learning a lot with a teacher. But there is something through your career that you've learned with your students that you go like, okay, that was a lesson that I've learned through any special occasion in your life, in your career, that you go like, okay, that was a biggest lesson that I've learned from one of your students, if you could share.
Okay, my favorite teacher in elementary school, it was my kindergarten teacher. No, my first grade teacher. I did love my kindergarten teacher. In fact, I went to her, she got married right after school, and I went to her wedding and at the church. I thought that was a big deal. But I loved my first grade teacher because I think that was the only time I was ever the teacher's pet, when the student that the teacher would call on a lot. So of course I liked that. I liked her because she taught me to read, and that was all I ever wanted, because from that moment on, and I continue to be an avid reader. And I also loved that every morning we would come into class, and on the blackboard, because that was in the days of the chalkboard, she would have a picture drawn that she drew herself in colored chalk. I had never seen colored chalk before, so that was incredible. And I don't know if she was a good artist, but certainly to my mind, she was a good artist. And that was, even though that was a tiny little thing, it was something special that she did for our class. So I loved Mrs. Kelton, was her name. In high school, I had a great teacher named Mr. Bagans. He turned me on to some of the great literature that I still love and revisit. He also would take us to this Manhattan, to New York City, and just expose us to the real world. He made a tremendous impression on me, and I'm still friends with him on social media. And he just was a really cool guy. I remember more from his class than I do from any other class that I took.
Wow. And one of the lessons that you've learned from any students through your career that you go like, okay, that was something that I will always have close to my heart.
Probably I had a little boy, maybe about 5 years ago, who had he didn't have any learning problems, but he had some emotional problems. It was hard for him to regulate his emotions. So I understood that. And so things that were easy for other students, as far as getting along with and playing with others, were not easy for him. And he also had a lot of anxiety and fear about things. I learned from him that I could, even though he had those challenges, I could reach him. I just had to do it in a way that I didn't always do for the other students. I had to learn what made him tick and work either around that or work with that. And it came to kind of fruition, or the conclusion was, we had an assembly. No, wasn't an assembly. It was a program where the kids would learn how to do a dance. It was something we did every year, and we had an artist come, and she would stay with us for 2 weeks and teach the children these international dances. And this child was petrified, and the first lesson did not go well. He couldn't keep up with it, and he ran off screaming. And I was able to talk with him and explain that even if I remember what it was. He said, I'm not a dancer. I'm not a dancer, and I never will be. And I said to him, you don't know that because you haven't tried it. And I said, and even if you're not a dancer, you can still try dancing. And he went back, and I'm almost tearing up when I think about this. On the day of the performance was over, and parents are clapping, and he whispers to me and said, I never thought I could do that.
Oh.
And I looked at him and I said, I did think you could do that. And he just hugged me. And he wasn't a hugger, because that was part of his challenges, was regulating emotions. But it taught me that even with what someone would consider a difficult child, or a child in a difficult situation, that if I just looked at the situation maybe a little bit differently, that I could reach him. That was very satisfying.
Oh, very sweet. Thanks for sharing. Thanks, Melissa.
You're welcome.
Last question for you is, tell us about your earliest memory in life.
I'm sure I have other memories earlier than this, but when I was about maybe not quite 4, so 3.5, my family moved from an apartment where we had been living. My mom, my dad, and then my brother, who was 2 years younger than me. And so just around that time, we bought a home, and this was a brand new home, and it was a house, not an apartment. And I remember going there before we moved in, and it was empty, no furniture yet, and nobody had lived there before us because it was new construction. So it was all empty. I remember running around, and I can still see it, from one room to the other in a circle. My little brother, who was 1.5 at the time, trying to toddle after me. And I'm just running around thinking, this is my new house. This is my new house. This is where I'm going to live. And I remember the sound that my feet made on the floor. And I just remember my mom and dad standing in the kitchen. So I guess that's my very first really clear memory.
Wow. Right, it's not the end yet. Let's play now the word association game. Okay, I'm going to give away some words. Just tell one word that comes to your mind. Quick thinking.
Okay.
So, I hope you are enjoying the interview. Before we do the word association game, don't forget to give a like. Don't forget to share this video. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Just click on the button right there. Thank you so much, and enjoy the word association game.
Okay.
Let's start with religion.
Spiritual.
Politics.
Complicated.
Love.
Happiness.
Money.
Helpful.
Family.
Support.
Sex.
Personal.
Life.
Precious.
Fear.
Anxiety.
Friendship.
Joy.
Desire.
Want.
Regrets.
Sadness.
Success.
Varied.
And one word for happiness.
Choice.
How about New Jersey? One word.
Diverse.
USA?
Divided.
And the last one now, teaching. One word.
Teaching. I'm going to do teacher. And for teacher, I would say saint. Teaching, a calling.
Okay. Let's pretend now I'm going to meet your lovely husband for a coffee, and I'm going to ask him, tell me the most beautiful thing about Melissa, and tell me something that she still needs to work on, to improve on. What he would say.
Well, if you asked him that question, first of all, he would laugh hysterically. And he is the beautiful part. That's what he would laugh hysterically at. My husband is not, he is about as opposite in temperament as I am as possible. And he's not one to talk about feelings or any of that. So I know his very first reaction would be, most beautiful thing about her is when she leaves. And he would be kidding, but that would be his first response. If I pressed him, I think he would say that I'm a really good mother. When he answered the question about what does she have to work on, his first thing would be everything, because he would be joking. And then this I agree with him on. He'd probably say she needs to learn how to calm down and relax and not jump to conclusions.
If I would ask the same question to your daughter, would be the same answer?
Let's see. She would probably be a little nicer to me. Thing that she liked the most about me, I think that, and this is a term that she uses, we use as a family. I think that she would say she likes the fact that I'm crazy, meaning that I'm quirky and that I'm different and that I can be entertaining because I do things that are funny. And I think her answer for what I have to improve on would be the same as her father's. Learn to calm down and not worry so much.
Do you think that is because your gift as a teacher, teaching, you have this way of being everywhere and very proactive?
Very, very animated, silly sometimes, and sometimes it's not even on purpose, just it happens to be what I did was silly. I didn't want it to be. But yeah, I do think that a great deal of it comes from being a teacher, because I was very animated, engaged, let's make it fun kind of person. Yeah. And I made my daughter's growing up years very fun. She might not remember it all, but I have pictures to support it. She had a really good childhood.
And let's say that I would meet our lovely Dave, the one who connected us. If I would ask him, define Melissa in one positive word, in one word, what he would say?
Oh, I know what he'd say. I don't know if it's positive. He would say nuts. And this is a thing we have together. Nuts, N-U-T-Z. So it doesn't mean that you're necessarily not in control of your faculties, but just that you're different, that you're funny, you're entertaining, you're passionate. I think all of those things wrapped up in one. And that you're a little bit cuckoo, a little bit.
I can see him watching the interview now, go like, oh my gosh, you're so right.
Oh yeah. And he'll probably correct me and tell me what else I should have said. So Dave, bring it on.
I think when I ask this question, when he watches the interview, you should pause the interview and see what he's gonna say before he watches the real answer from you.
I think so.
Let's play now, Melissa in the magic box, and you can ask me a question. Okay, Melissa from New Jersey, you can ask me a question now.
All right. If you could travel back in time to a period of history, what would it be and why?
Okay, good question. And the first thing that came to my mind is I live in London. I'm originally from Brazil, but I've been living in England for the last 17 years. And I think I'm meant to be here. I think I feel so happy here. I think, the English culture, everything about England, it just makes me feel that I'm meant to be here. Saying that, last year already, 2022, the lovely Queen, she passed away, and I think I always been a big fan of history about, the royal family, and I think if I could be in a moment when the coronation was, the moment when she became a queen, I watched so many times those documentaries about that moment. I think if I could just be sitting there on the side, just see the moment when, this young, beautiful woman, being coronated at this time, and without knowing the lifetime that she would live, her legacy. And saying that as well, last year in summertime, my English teacher from Brazil, she came over to London to visit, and we went to oh my God, the name of the castle where, oh my God, I forgot now. We went to visit the castle where they kept her the dress that she was wearing on that day. So and I didn't know that was there. And when I was walking, we were kind of walking around the castle, seeing different things, and suddenly there was a room with this dress in the middle. And from far away, I was like, oh my God, I know what's dress there. And I couldn't believe I spent there like at least half an hour, 45 minutes, just walking around the dress, just to see the small details of this dress. And it was quite small actually, because when you watch on TV, you have this idea of this big moment, but it looks so small. And I couldn't believe that I was literally, like so close to the dress that she was wearing on the coronation when she became queen. So I was like, wow, that's something that I would never forget. And so yeah, I think if I had the superpower to be there, at least at that moment when that happened, I think it would be, a moment that I would never forget. So yeah, that was the moment that the first thing that came to my mind for sure.
Very good.
Been in London, by the way.
I've been to London once. Actually went there on my honeymoon in 1987, and wow. I loved it. I would go back in a heartbeat. When I go on vacation, even now, I'm not a beach person. I don't really relax on a vacation. I like to do things. And London had so much to offer. I loved the West End, of course, the theater scene. Mm-hmm. My favorite thing, though, that we did, my husband would agree, was we did a Jack the Ripper tour the very first night we were there. And it was just a fascination I've always had. And just to be surrounded, we're down in the Whitechapel area, just to be surrounded by, it was November, so it was very atmospheric. The tour guide was a great storyteller. You felt like you were there. But I just loved the vibrancy of London. It reminded me in many ways of Manhattan, which is my favorite place in the world. Just so much to do and so much to offer. The museums, Harrods. I really loved London.
And I just remember now the name of the castle, Windsor Castle, where she, Windsor Castle. Right. So that's where I've been here for so many years and I never visited. And when my teacher was here, I was like, okay, we need to go there. And I wasn't expecting to see the dress that she was wearing on the coronation. I was like, oh my God, that was the best part of the trip for sure. Melissa, did you enjoy the interview?
Very, very much. I've been looking forward to it since Dave's interview. You have a way of making people feel comfortable and at ease. So I really appreciate that. So yes, very good experience.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. When when I think it's funny when I invite people to participate in the show, but what I like as well, when people introduce somebody else to the show, that's what I like as well, because somehow, it's a connection already there. Do you know what I mean? Right. So I think that's the best part. Before you go, if you could share a positive message, something that you live by.
I'm going to use a quote from one of my favorite Broadway musicals. I love theater. And this is a quote from Rent, and it's "No day but today." And what that means to me is that you have to appreciate what you have in this moment at this time, because nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. And if you spend your time worrying or wishing, I mean, it's okay to have wishes and dreams, but if you spend too much time on that, you miss out on what that day has to give you. That's a lesson I've learned over the last few years, I guess, as I've gotten older. But no day but today.
Very good. And sometimes you need to remember that every day, because, we need to remind ourselves that, as you said, it's today. Today's a day to live, to smile, to make mistakes, to meet people, to have challenges. I think you need to live the day we're living right now at the moment. Isn't it? For sure. I agree. Melissa, regards to your daughter, to your husband, and you keep in touch, okay? Thank you so much for the interview. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. This was a great experience.
Happy New Year. Enjoy your year.
Happy New Year. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
So, did you like the show? Don't forget to give a like, share it, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to be part of the show as well, first, subscribe to our channel, and after that, just go to our website, www.williamandthemagicbox.com, and send us a request saying why would you like to be part of the show. And I see you there. Bye bye, see you next time.